Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Exchange. I'm Tom Lenfestey, your host, here with another great program today, another great guest that I'm excited to bring to you, a longtime partner of mine with Law Practice Exchange, just somebody we really look to as one of our trusted partners for clients, and excited to dive into the conversation. But really, the expertise, of course, is in helping law firms. So, very excited today to welcome Pam Meissner. Pam, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Yeah, and Pam, you kind of have you're quoted as being a unicorn in some ways, right? You're a CPA by training, right? And again, you've really worn, I think, almost every hat on the financial side and in different types of businesses, everything else. Can you give us a little bit of how did the roadmap go to get from where you are today?
Well, there's a lot of long stories in there, so let me see if I can pick out the highlights for your listeners. I think the overarching theme of my career has been I just never said no, and I had a high tolerance for risks. So big breaks came when I moved abroad, worked just after the wall came down in privatization work in Poland, and then moved to Russia. So I saw the growth, the tremendous overnight successes, if you would, in a very messy situation. And so I think that helps me do what I do today because we really plug into law firms that are trying to grow, right? They've got a proof of concept and now they want to scale. Now they want to put some gas onto it. And, I've been in the trenches, so doing this just fits. I have the road less traveled, so I've had all those big careers. I took a decade off, and then I went back to work. I got to work with an entrepreneur, and I think that's where I really honed and prepped for today, because entrepreneurs are special snowflakes, I mean, you gotta love a good visionary, right? And
Sure.
if you don't get that, I don't think you can do what we do, right? If you don't
There you go.
have the empathy, if you don't find them entertaining, then it's hard to help them, right?
And then where are you helping them go today? Like, what do you do with them at CathCap to help them go?
Right. So, because we've been at this for so long, there's very little you can do that surprises us. But whenever you dive into the numbers, you're going to find some stuff, right? Because they're entrepreneurs and they don't know what they don't know. And I think they find comfort in the fact that you can't surprise us. We aren't going to work with people who haven't reached a ceiling. So they're big enough that they've got proof of concept, right? But they're coming up against ceilings. Right? And that ceiling should be, I don't want to practice law anymore. I don't only want to do marketing. But then they keep getting slapped upside the head because something goes awry in the finances, right? Or they lose sleep at night, or they go to these conferences and they don't think they measure up when, because of the extensiveness of our practice, we have the benchmarks, right? So we can say, yeah, whatever they said at that conference, that guy was not speaking the truth. This is what I've seen. I've seen enough to know that, in these areas you're doing well. I think the opportunity to do better and the opportunity to hire people that care as much about their business as they do is something that seems to resonate with our clients. They come to an understanding of, I was a great lawyer, but they don't go to law school to do math, except for give me any number and I can take 1/3 of it. They also didn't go to school to manage people. And so when they come to us, they're feeling pain, right?
Sure.
And they don't want to live there, but yet they know they have something that the market values. And so, everything runs through the numbers. And if we can solve it, we're going to partner with them to solve it. If not, then we have a network with people, you know how much I refer people to you.
Sure.
That we've just been there, done that. So
I think the amazing part, Pam, you kind of, you relayed your experience of working with lawyers and they come in with expectations or they come in with these challenges or they come in from a conference where they heard and they feel like they don't measure up. I know from seeing behind the curtains that no firm is perfect. No business is perfect. It just doesn't work that way. as you kind of noted, as you gain, focus on perfection, right? Just like the practice of law. But as you get to a certain place, you grow and scale and something else breaks, right?
Yep.
And so the goal is, I think, and just kind of looking at your story, it's like as these owners come to you with a pain point, right? The good news is they're seeking to do better, right? They're seeking to improve their business, their way they manage that business or ownership. And I think as an owner, that's just right there. And I think that's where they come to you for that financial path, that clarity, that help that you can provide because they're hitting that obstacle is just so huge.
Yeah, and we have to customize because every firm has a rhythm, and they have a rhythm for a reason because of their culture, because of the type of law that they practice. Fighting against that isn't going to do anybody any good. It's saying, okay, here's where we are, and here's where we want to go, and how do we bridge that gap?
That's right. And I think, as you work with owners, of course, we work with owners in the marketplace. One of the biggest things that maybe you don't talk about on the financial side as much, everybody wants to talk numbers, they want to talk ratios, percentages, bottom line, top line, but is really where the owners are in the headspace, right? Or where they're kind of firmly focused. And I'll call this like foundationally, right? Because you kind of mentioned already, like each one's coming in with a different, kind of a different focus. They're a little unique, right? They've got a different plan. And what I would ask you is when owners come in, how important or what do you see from kind of a headspace mentality before you start focus on fixing? Before you start focus on growth and scale, that really for you and your team is important to address and start there as a foundational so that the rest becomes easier. Because I'll give you a little deeper
Yeah.
explanation. What we find when we go through exit planning, sale, anything else, is that owner mentality and like, being vested, but being knowledgeable, everything else, having that is actually the more predictor of success to a successful sale or anything else than the financials sometimes of the deal, right? It's just really have they focused on it, bought in, emotionally checked into, I need help and I've come to you for help. And how can you help me do that? And kind of, does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. So there's a couple of different pieces of that we see. As I mentioned before, if they haven't hit that ceiling, there's nothing we can do to get them to open up. I think because we're so straightforward, we're not going to cherry coat it, right? That when we say that you're doing well here, you're doing well there. If we say this needs work, I think they appreciate just us saying this needs work.
Mhm.
The other piece to it is goes back to their financial thermostat, right? So everybody, and this kind of gets to their business acumen, I think is what you were referring to. And I think you wrote a great blog article about two firms on paper that are completely different when it comes to putting a valuation on them. And I couldn't agree with you more. So a financial thermostat is just that. It is where your financial mentality is set, okay? And it goes back to, if you're a spender, your financial thermostat is set on spending. And I'm going to tell you there are no better spenders on the face of the earth than attorneys, right? If there is a high-end thing, they're going to want it. And they're probably going to buy it, right? But if your financial thermostat is set low, then you're not going to invest. Knowing and getting them to acknowledge where that financial thermostat is set is incredibly helpful to having them realize the work that has to be done to getting what they want. So it's the financial thermostat is set, and there's 14 hidden elements of your personal financial thermostat. Ruby May out of the University of Houston did all this research. And she said, if you're firmly set here, you have to realize the hidden rules to be able to adjust your thermostat. But essentially, it is set at that table that you grew up at, that kitchen table, right?
Sure.
Do you remember good old, meals, the family table?
Yeah, absolutely. Before, soccer practices and everything else got in the way in the evenings and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's the goal. And what you're saying is there is a certain way, right? Like there's a certain, and I called it foundation, but how certain law firm owners are coming in that they're here and they believe this is how they believe, right? Tell me a little bit, because so much of what we deal with is law firms looking for growth. And so they're looking to acquire law practices, as a form of growth. But a lot of the coaching that we try to do is if you don't have your financial thermostat and foundations and everything correct. Maybe you have some of those growth gremlins, as part of it. Don't go and double your revenues by acquiring a firm.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to people and how savvy are they at identifying, their people. And you've seen this, I think Brooke talks about it a lot of times is, are you aligned with the company's core values and are you good at your job, right? And it's a 2x2. And so in the upper right-hand corner are your stars, right? They're the people who align with your core values and they're great at their jobs, right? The other end are your rats. They're not very good at their job and they don't align and they've got to go. It's the other two quadrants that to me I see being real gremlins to growing. So this is, your puppies, right? So these are people who absolutely, wave the company flag, right? They're just out there. Everybody loves them, but they're not very good at their jobs, right? People don't focus in on that because you can't have a litter of puppies in your office, right? Okay. But if you have a puppy, you need to call it that and you need to have a plan to get them from being a puppy to being a star. I
Sure.
think the part that really causes loss of sleep for owners is somebody who's really good at their job. They're going to be somebody who usually is a litigator and doesn't align with your core values. Giving, all they see is that if they deal with the issues with that person, that there goes revenue. And what we've seen again and again and again is that is not the case at all. Actually, revenue grows. And if you go to it's not something just to deal with quickly, right? You have to put a plan together. But if you
Sure.
do that, then your stars won't leave, right? They'll actually thank you. Like, finally you woke up and saw what a jerk this person is, right? And they'll rally and replace that revenue and then some because it's a much better place to work. But they hold you hostage, right? Some people call them terrorists because they bring forth so much money to the bottom line,
Sure.
to the top and the bottom line. So these are the kind of things that really keep people from growing the way they want to.
And law is still like, we have conversations now with private equity and everything else moving in this space, but law is such a human capital driven business, right? Like human capital is such a key component that I think, Pam, what you're saying is it's so hard for lawyers because they get back to that person produces or they're a good lawyer, right? But they are so contrary to really what the rest are doing that it prevents the scale. And I think in law, especially in any business where there's so much human capital, that is the fear is a person that's good in that seat is something you just can't do without, right? So we've had that problem with, oh, well, this person's been here forever or anything else, but they're really prohibiting you from that growth, which
And
is just a really hard thing.
oftentimes they were what the firm needed 2-3 years ago, and they're not growing with the firm. And so that's where owners have loyalty that employees will never give them. And they don't realize that hidden cost of keeping somebody beyond their alignment with where the firm's going.
Sure. And it's a growth problem, right? Which is a good thing. But like you said, that's a ceiling problem. They've hit a different potential ceiling and gone from there. One of the other things, Pam, that just makes me think a lot of what we talk about is, lawyers, being a lawyer, we are trained, it almost feels like, to not make the bold decisions. Sometimes,
What?
coming out
It
of law school,
depends.
yeah, it depends, right? Or, immediately you're presented with an opportunity or something else. And the goal really in law school is it teaches us see all the bad things that could happen, right? All the bad things first, not the good things, right? But all the bad things that can happen. So what I wanted to ask you is, and I've seen this in practice because we have worked, of course, with you and your team, on buyers and sellers and working through this. But how do you approach, especially law firm owners in making those tough decisions? Like, what does financial clarity or other clarity that you can really bring them, do you think what it does for empowering them to make those bold decisions? Because I think that makes them better business owners and better business managers when they can make those big decisions, but with clarity.
Yes. So one of the aspects of clarity that we bring is experience, right? Because we have cases where somebody's been there and done that, and we can tell them that they're going to be okay. And that because of our track record, they have confidence in us. And at the top, it's very lonely, right? And the last thing any of us want to do is reinvent the wheel. And I think we try to do is we try to show them through data what the story is. Something happens with an employee, right? And the firm comes in and says, now we're going to have minimum billable hours, or, your cases have to move at this average time on desk needs to be here. And they focus on it from the standpoint of one data point. But when we bring the whole story and we present it graphically over a period of time, they gain clarity and confidence because they're like, this isn't just what happened last week when whatever, the dog died, or, this or that. This has been the case for the last 18 months
Yeah.
or 2 years.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest flaws I see in management is looking at the single data point. You'll never win on a single data point. But when you are clear with what you expect and you consistently communicate where they are relative to that bar, we have seen tremendous value added straight to the bottom line by making yourself available on a regular cadence, being clear about expectations, and using a tool that they can tell the story themselves, that they get it through that trend analysis. There's a great book by, I think I have it here, Michael Bungay-Stanier, The Coaching Habit. Love it. What we have found is oftentimes owners keep the monkey on their back, but it shows you how to keep it on their back and how to help them solve the problem. And 9 times out of 10, once they understand what you expect, they're more than happy to do it. They might not know how.
Yep. Yeah, it's reflecting and giving that, strategic value back to them, right? It's that reinforcement of this is why, and really helping them improve their business, helping them improve their life. And that's kind of where, I want to talk about like scaling without burning out, right? Plain and simple. What do you think as to really what helps them scale without burnout?
Yeah, so that letting go, they joke, they call me the book lady. But a book I love comes down to trust, okay? And it's called The Speed of Trust. And firms with high trust get dividends, and firms with low trust get taxed. And most emerging business leaders in this space come at it with they have to earn my trust attitude. And the opposite is true. You have to create trust, and you have to give trust first. Not saying be bold, but I think a lot of them have been burned by abdicating or turning over the kingdom for all the reasons like, finally this person has all the answers. They may or may not, right? One of the strengths at CathCap is we have early on, we tried to do everything, right? And had the CFO do everything soup to nuts. And there was a burnout factor that we were facing. And so we divided and said, it's really hard to be strategic and to be in the detail. And so every CFO has a financial analyst, and she's the one down deep in the data who brings it up to the CFO to consume and then discuss with the client. There's so much cash in this business that I think it's hard to trust.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's the overarching. I mean, maybe another bad analogy, but I have these conversations with my teenagers at home. It's like we can have a relationship built on trust, or we can have a relationship built on rules. But when I look at a law firm, right, or a business, anything else, and if you're the owner or you're the CEO, if you have a organization that's really built on trust, right? That trust has hopefully, have been earned by those individuals, right? Like they've earned your
Yeah.
trust and you've been able to let go, right? And that's my kind of message to my teenagers is, which would you rather have? A relationship of parent teen, that's built on trust or rules? But if you don't earn that trust, rules. But the problem with rules, I think, and you can go systems and SOPs are great.
Right.
But if you are constantly monitoring your employees and have to oversee and watch, that's still burnout, right? That's
Yeah.
still burnout
Yeah.
from that factor.
It's the tax. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part for especially a lot of lawyers who are firm owners is it's hard to let go. And so even though you do sometimes trust, you haven't fully relinquished, right? And I know, when we talk about like, getting into like EOS or,
Hmm.
what Brooke's working on and everything else, it's like so great because it's hopefully giving that structure, but trust is the key component of that, right? Yes, you need
Like
systems. Yes, you need organization, right?
it's like Lencioni and his five dysfunctions of a team. I think the other thing that I often see with people when we're starting to work with them is a lack of understanding that, as they were coming up and learning and growing, right, they made mistakes. And guess who paid for those mistakes? And that's fine. You can justify it as, oh, I'm learning, I'm going to do better, right? Is as their team does the same thing, guess who pays for those mistakes? You do.
Right.
And they get angry. And I'm like, but didn't you make mistakes? And you gave yourself grace, right? But I see them struggling with a lack of control because I think control is the enemy of trust, to your point of rules and processes and procedures and whatnot. But there's a lot more nuance to trust, I think, than we acknowledge.
It's interesting. May have shared this story already on the podcast, but we helped a plaintiff attorney, had a great firm, had run and owned the firm forever, but had a good team, had a lot of love and good culture within the team, everything else, but they needed a succession plan and they did not have it in-house. So we had to go to the market to find it. And all along that process, and Pam, you hear it, of course, from attorneys, it's like, I'm very worried. Like this is this is mine. This is my baby, right? I've run this firm for this long. I am very fearful of losing control. And our goal always is to find the right successor, right? So
Mm-hmm.
ease it. Like you found a right, good, chosen successor, everything else. But all up to almost closing day, our client, the seller was telling us, I'm very fearful. Tom, I've told you loss of control for me. Like, I like to be able to make my decisions. I like to have my way. This is going to be hard. I understand this. 2 or 3 days after closing, I talked to him again, and he said, You know what? I was kind of dumb to think it was all about control. What I didn't realize is when you give up that control, a lot of burdens are taken off of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of freedom is gained
Mm-hmm.
from giving that control to somebody else, right? And he said, in his situation, he's like, I don't have to show up first to the office today.
Right.
I don't have to make sure we're making payroll
Mm-hmm.
today. I, get to have more of his personal time and freedom is where he was going. But I think that applies even if you're running your firm on a day to day and not looking at exit. Once you shift that to a trusted individual, right? There is this freedom you just gained, and it's a freedom to, as you point, even like in this financial analyst to CFO, to focus on really what you should be
Mm-hmm.
focusing on, right? And really doing more with your time because you've given up what you thought you needed so much, right? You just thought you needed.
Yes. And here comes to another point that I see good leaders struggling with as they go into transition. Is they're like, I want to protect my team.
Sure.
You've heard this, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I care, and they genuinely care compassionately about their team. And it's a bit of an illusion that they think they could have control after the fact. And through all my many experience, you choose an industry, things are going to change. But they forget the key thing that they have given to these people that they care about. They have given them experience. They have poured into them over the years. They have given them opportunities. Yes, they are a critical reason they are who they are. And that's a gift nobody can take away.
Absolutely.
Stay together, but a piece of you goes with them.
And I think that's the component we talk a lot, Pam, about, and you do the same, about having your exit plan because everybody wants this control. Everybody wants to protect their team. But the worst thing in the world is if you don't have that exit plan, you are actually not protecting that team.
Right.
right? I mean, to your point, you've given them so much already. And then if you want to give them that last gift, it's actually having that exit plan where at least they have an opportunity to stay, right? Who has, dealing with a health issue, right? With the lawyer owner. And they're in panic. And the team then has no choice but to leave and find jobs.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lack of really protection because you're so like, I'm going to keep this control. Well, really control the path and control the process and exit planning. But by you taking those steps, you're actually protecting them by holding back and saying, well, I don't want things to change because I'm fearful. One, like you said. Yeah. And I think overall, the most interesting part is we kind of go through this is there's common things that really delay and derail exit planning, right? But as we go through those, usually what we're seeing now, Pam, is kind of those who get the best exit are the owners that have gone through everything we just talked about in the last 30 minutes or so of this podcast. Because when we have law firms that come looking for exit and the owner is really in that owner seat, they're not in the everywhere seat. I mean, they're the most marketable firms out there.
Yes.
And I'm sure you see that as well. And so part of that goal is to get the owners to that seat, right?
Right. And so I have a great exercise for that. I send owners who want that but don't have it yet, I send them on vacation for 90 days. And two things happen. One, you figure out what you're doing that nobody else can do because it broke while you were gone. And two, they figure out if they can really be retired. Can you not work for 90 days? Now, most of
Hmm.
them do it figuratively and don't literally take a 90-day trip. But that is really the test to, it's an inverse proportion between value and your role in the firm. The less you're doing in the firm, the more valuable your firm is. And that's a huge hit to the ego.
Yeah, but you're building business value, right? The value, the hardest part for us is we always talk about there's personal value, like you as the attorney have your brand relationship. And traditionally, that's how so many lawyers thought about building a law practice. The business was just an extension of them having too much work for themselves to do, right?
Yes.
And so they really didn't, yeah, right. I mean, they just didn't focus on, not all, of course, certain have been built on business focus,
Mm-hmm.
but it is really nice to see when that happens and you've built a business that has value. Man, you've really done, I tell all that you've done something special and truly unique that a lot of others in the law firm space have not been able to do is really have that business. And if, you are in that, it doesn't devalue what you've done. It actually gives you credit, I think, for all the work you have done,
Absolutely.
to take those moves, to hire the right advisors, to work through those different steps and everything else. All right, I'm going to ask you, get back to the financial core and maybe we'll kind of close with this. But you look and you help, on the sell side, you help on the buy side, because of course we're working through this. If you're, let's go first to the buyer. You're a law firm owner, you're looking at growth through acquisition. Where does the conversation that you start with those law firm owners to looking at buying? Because again, our goal is to get, some of these law firms who don't have good CFO advisory teams to you. And like you said, that's a ceiling they have, right? Like they've been okay maybe to that point, but now they've got an opportunity and they don't know how to approach and investigate that opportunity. And that's one that, they probably needed you a couple years ago, but that's one that's hopefully going to force them to really look to your team and kind of do that. But where do you start with that type of buyer focus lawyer?
So I think you need to be in touch with where do you really add value, right? Are you really good at lead generation, right? Are you experts in your craft? Yeah, you have to be okay in your craft, but are you really exceptional, right? Or do you have great processes and procedures? Understand what your special sauce is and
Hmm.
then go find somebody who doesn't have that. Okay. At the end of the day, there's two things that determine what a law firm's valued at. It's valued the multiple, and a lot about the multiple has to do with how important is the owner. But the other is net operating profit, right? What is
Sure.
the total owner benefit? And if you go into it knowing your numbers, if you find somebody subpar, then you have conversations. Do you want to buy somebody who's good and make them great? But don't buy somebody who's awful and think you can make them good, because that kind of a firm is toxic, right? and don't place value on necessarily that everybody's going to stay.
And so I think it's great advice for really what you're saying is look at what you do that's awesome,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Go out, find somebody that's not as awesome, but pretty good. And you could roll them in to make them awesome as well under your platform. And it's a good strategic fit. Would that be, yeah. And how about the sell side? How about those law firm owners that maybe you've been working with for a while and they're coming to you? You and your team been working with them on everything. Where does that sell or really that exit plan discussion start?
Part of it is so let's say you successfully exit, and then what? I think Price Waterhouse said that 75% of entrepreneurs regret selling in the first year after the transaction. And a lot of that has to do with them not understanding, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, right? To the 90-day test. How many rounds of golf can you play before you're tired,
Right.
right? Okay, fine, go build your dream home. And then what? And how much of your value also comes from being the boss, of having everybody look up to you every day and talk to you about interesting things and stuff like that. What we try to do is, we usually build a runway. And if they have 18 to 24 months, you can really impact that valuation positively, right? Because you can start to take some of those hats off that you've worn for way too long. And you can also improve the bottom line and deal with the gremlins that are in your house and start showing a trend that you're pretty awesome and it's worth the investment, and find the buyer who is what the firm needs, right? Because there's absentee buyers, but there's active buyers. But I think there's a lot of impact you can have if you have 18 to 24 months, both in your mindset, but also in your books.
Yeah, and I think, Pam, you put it great. That 18 to 24 months before you really seek exit, whether it's a buyer, eternal success, whatever your option is, a merger, is so impactful.
Question. If I were a younger lawyer, what would I do with this firm, right? Tell that story of opportunity, right? Tell the story of, fine, you may be tired, and that's okay. But if you were a younger lawyer, you would teach them how to make money that you haven't made yet. Because that's what a buyer's looking for, is opportunity for upside. They don't want something that's been completely optimized, but they want something that has some room for meeting a gap that they have.
It was interesting. I was doing working with a mastermind group a couple months ago down in Florida. And one of the, just the workshop tasks that I had them do is pitch their firm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, lawyers never usually have a hard time talking, but talking about their firm, or as you put it, what would I do? Like, what is this opportunity?
Yeah.
Right? Because as owners, we always know the problems, right? And we can always say, oh, we're so busy, right? Isn't that the typical lawyer response? Like, we're so busy, whatever else. But really, like, to your point, Pam, and I think that's great. If I was 10 years younger, 20 years younger, here is the opportunity, right? That exists with this firm. We're awesome, but if you really, really want to grow and scale this, and you're exactly right, that's what every buyer wants to hear. If I just had unlimited money, time, resource, what could I do with this firm that you've built? Right. And for a seller, that's really hard to be like, are you judging me? No, they're saying you've done something great. They just want to know how they can preserve your legacy and take it to the next level.
And
Right.
pour fuel on it, right? Pour some gas on
That's
it.
right. That's right. Absolutely. Well, Pam, this has been great. I want to try to close things with maybe a couple quick questions. Can we rapid fire a couple?
Go for it.
All right. One mindset shift every firm owner should make this week. What do you think it is?
You need help.
Good one. One thing firm owners almost always overestimate about their readiness to exit or to sell.
That they aren't that integral in the firm.
Where can listeners learn more about CathCap and you?
Sure, they can email me, pam@cathcap.com. It's a bit of a tongue twister, CATHCAP, or visit us online at cathcap.com. Happy to have a conversation with anybody as they take these journeys, because Buyers are going to do this transaction many times, but sellers, you probably only sell your law firm once.
That's right. And Pam, just for everybody, I think we alluded to it, talked about in this podcast. We've had the opportunity where, of course, we've been on advisory, maybe on that exit, that transactional aspect for a seller or buyer, but you and your team have been there to help that seller and buyer or to hold that relationship either prior or during or anything else. And we've seen really the value you have driven in those clients to not just help them through the transaction, but really to give them the confidence and clarity that we talked about a lot to make the right decision. So I greatly appreciate our relationship with you and your CathCap team and everything you do for our clients and for anybody else that's listening. And Pam, you win for mentioning two books that actually I have never heard of that I look over in my library and I think that's pretty good, but I have two books now to add to my list. So thank you for that. And I greatly appreciate the time and look forward to connecting soon enough.
Okay,
Thanks, Pam.
thank you.